The truth does not always arrive like a confession. Sometimes, it arrives like a weapon, dropped into the center of a room already full of suspicion, pride, and old resentment. And by the time anyone understands what has happened, the damage is already spreading through every corner of a family that built its power on control. That is exactly how the nightmare begins for Noah, when a confrontation that should have ended with anger and distance suddenly turns into something far more devastating. One sentence from Audra is enough to freeze the air, enough to turn Noah from a man defending himself into a man staring into the possibility that his entire future may have just been rewritten without his consent. Her claim is explosive not only because of what it suggests, but because of the timing, the precision, and the cold confidence with which she delivers it. In that instant, Noah feels something worse than panic. He feels disorientation. He feels the sickening sensation of losing ownership over his own memory, his own choices, his own past. He refuses to accept it, refuses with every ounce of force he has, because in his mind, there is no logical path leading to this moment. Yet Audra does not retreat. She does not stumble. She watches him with the kind of stillness that makes denial feel weaker with every passing second, and that quiet certainty begins to break through his outrage. At first, Noah clings to anger, because anger is easier to survive than doubt. He tells himself this must be another manipulation, another one of Audra's calculated moves, another attempt to pull him back into the toxic gravity she has always carried with her. But the problem is not just Audra's accusation. The problem is the way she frames it, the way she reaches into a forgotten crack in the past and opens it wider. She reminds him of a night he has never fully understood, a blurred stretch of time he dismissed long ago because the details were incomplete, fractured by alcohol, emotional exhaustion, and the kind of recklessness that leaves a stain even when memory refuses to preserve the shape of it. Noah had buried that night, because burying it had allowed him to move forward. Now Audra drags it back into the light and turns it into evidence. That is when the fear truly takes hold. Not fear of fatherhood alone, though that is heavy enough, but fear that he may have been present in a decision he never consciously made. Fear that the weakness of one lost night could become the chain around his neck for the rest of his life. Fear that somewhere beneath his certainty, there is just enough uncertainty to destroy him. The news does not remain private for long, because nothing this volatile ever stays contained in the Newman orbit. The family learns of it in fragments, then in sharp details, then in the ugly emotional interpretations that always spread faster than facts. What begins as a personal accusation quickly becomes a full-scale crisis because in Genoa City, every private scandal becomes a public vulnerability, and for the Newmans, vulnerability is the one thing they cannot afford. Nick reacts first not as a businessman or a son of Victor's empire, but as a father watching his own son stagger into a trap he may not even recognize. He demands clarity, demands action, demands that Noah stop spiraling and start thinking. Yet, beneath Nick's pressure is a more painful emotion, one he cannot easily conceal. He is disappointed, not necessarily in Noah's choices, but in the possibility that Noah may have been careless enough to let someone like Audra back into his life in any form. Nick knows exactly how dangerous a cunning, desperate person can be when pride, money, and social ruin are all in play. His instinct is to protect, but his method feels like interrogation, and that only drives Noah deeper into isolation. The rest of the family reacts with their own versions of alarm. The Newman name has survived betrayals, affairs, crimes, cover-ups, and corporate wars. But scandal still matters, because scandal weakens the illusion of invincibility. Every whispered rumor about Noah and Audra becomes not just gossip but leverage, something rivals could exploit, something enemies could twist, something that could stain Noah long after the truth emerges. Some family members instinctively believe Audra is lying because deception fits too neatly with what they know of her. Others, more cautious, are disturbed by Noah's own uncertainty, by the fact that his denial is fueled by conviction, but shadowed by incomplete memory. That gap becomes the most dangerous element of all. In a family that values certainty, Noah's doubt makes him look unstable, and instability is something the Newmans never forgive easily. For Noah, the emotional collapse is gradual and merciless. He cannot sleep because every attempt to reconstruct the past ends in the same blank wall. He revisits every moment he had with Audra, every look, every half-finished argument, every warning sign he once ignored because he believed he was stronger than the chaos around her. Now he realizes that strength may have been an illusion. He begins to wonder whether he had been chosen long before the accusation, whether Audra had quietly identified his emotional weak points and waited for the right moment to strike. That suspicion poisons him. It makes him ashamed not only of what may have happened, but of how vulnerable he may have been without realizing it. Noah has always tried to separate himself from the more ruthless instincts of his family. He wanted distance from power games, distance from manipulation, distance from the endless cycle of revenge and ego that has consumed so many Newmans. But this scandal drags him right back into that world. And worse, it suggests he may not be different from it at all. It suggests he may be just another man whose arrogance convinced him he could stand near danger without being changed by it. When Noah pushes for a DNA test, it seems like the first rational move in a situation ruled by emotional chaos. It is not compassion that drives him, nor even simple skepticism. It is desperation. He needs something measurable, something objective, something that cannot be distorted by memory or fear or manipulation. The request should have cornered Audra. Instead, she responds with delay, and that delay transforms suspicion into something darker. She claims health concerns, exhaustion, stress, vulnerability. On the surface, these are reasons no decent person can aggressively challenge without seeming cruel. But underneath them, there is timing again, strategy again, control again. The longer she delays, the longer Noah remains trapped in uncertainty. The longer uncertainty lasts, the more room there is for pressure, rumor, and emotional coercion. Noah begins to see the shape of the game, and it terrifies him because it means Audra may not need proof to win. She only needs time. That is when a secret thread begins to pull the entire situation into more dangerous territory. A whisper reaches Noah through a source that has no reason to protect him but every reason to enjoy the spectacle. Audra may not have been involved with only him. There may be another man, another connection, another possibility she has concealed. The information is incomplete, frustratingly so, but it is enough to shift the ground beneath Noah's feet. Suddenly the issue is no longer just paternity, it is motive. If Audra has been hiding another relationship, then her accusation may not be an emotional demand for accountability, but a calculated selection of the best possible target. And Noah, with his last name, his family's wealth, and his emotional reluctance to publicly destroy a woman who claims to be pregnant, becomes the perfect mark. Noah starts investigating in secret, not because he enjoys deception, but because he no longer knows whom to trust with partial truths. He retraces dates, movements, messages, unexplained disappearances, and fragments of behavior that once seemed meaningless. He notices patterns that make his stomach turn. Audra had appeared unusually attentive during certain vulnerable periods of his life. She had known when to provoke him and when to soften. She had found ways to keep herself in his emotional periphery even after they were supposedly finished. There are hints that she had been communicating with someone else behind the scenes, someone whose name remains obscured but whose presence is undeniable. Noah begins to fear that he was not merely careless. He was positioned, set up, possibly manipulated on a night he barely remembers, then preserved as an option until he became useful. That realization fills him with a violent mix of humiliation and fury. He is not just defending himself from scandal anymore. He is fighting against the possibility that his body, memory, and future were treated like pieces in someone else's scheme. As Noah grows colder, Audra grows more unpredictable. The mask of wounded vulnerability begins to crack, revealing flashes of something harder underneath. She senses him slipping away from confusion and moving toward resistance, and that shift makes her dangerous. Her tone changes. Her sadness sharpens into menace. She stops asking for understanding and starts implying consequences. If Noah refuses to stand beside her publicly, if he keeps questioning her, if he humiliates her by treating her claim like a lie, then she may have no choice but to reveal everything. It is the kind of threat that works precisely because it is vague. Everything could mean truth, half-truth, private history, emotional secrets, or carefully edited lies. In Audra's hands, exposure becomes a weapon more powerful than proof. She knows the Newmans hate scandal almost as much as they hate being outmaneuvered. She knows public sympathy often belongs to the person who appears most wounded, and she knows Noah's instinctive decency, even damaged as it is, may stop him from destroying her before she destroys him. Nick watches his son harden in real time and realizes the crisis is no longer just about whether Audra is telling the truth. It is about what this ordeal is doing to Noah's soul. There is a brutality in how public suspicion reshapes a man, especially a man already struggling with guilt and memory. Nick wants Noah to stay rational, but he also understands the darker impulse rising in him, the impulse to stop playing defense and strike back before Audra can tighten her hold. That impulse frightens Nick because he has lived long enough to know what happens when a Newman man decides that humiliation must be answered with force. One reckless move could turn Noah from victim into villain. One badly timed confrontation could give Audra exactly the material she needs to paint him as unstable, cruel, and morally compromised. So Nick pushes, not only for evidence, but for discipline. Yet that discipline comes at a cost. The more Noah suppresses his rage, the more corrosive it becomes. The family fractures under the pressure. Some believe they must quietly contain the scandal, offer support, and avoid provoking Audra until facts are secured. Others argue that containment is weakness, that the only way to handle someone like Audra is to expose her before she can establish herself as credible. This internal division opens old wounds, because every Newman conflict eventually becomes a referendum on power, image, and loyalty. Noah becomes both participant and symbol. His pain is real, but so is the family's obsession with managing the situation. More than once, he begins to feel that he has disappeared beneath the machinery of strategy. Everyone is discussing what should be done, what must be protected, what cannot be allowed. Very few are asking what it feels like to stand inside a lie that might be true, or a truth that might have been engineered. That loneliness deepens his anger, until it becomes almost impossible for him to distinguish between justice and revenge. Meanwhile, Audra is not untouched by pressure, and that complexity makes the story even more combustible. Beneath her manipulations lies genuine desperation, though not necessarily innocence. She is a woman who has built herself through calculation because she no longer believes vulnerability is survivable unless it can be weaponized first. If she is lying, then the lie is not random. It is born from fear, ambition, and the belief that power only belongs to those willing to seize it before they are discarded. If she is telling some portion of the truth, then the lie may be in the packaging rather than the event. Either way, Audra is operating from a place of survival sharpened into aggression. That does not absolve her. It makes her more dangerous. She is not simply chasing Noah. She is fighting against irrelevance, against exposure, against whatever secret connection to the other man threatens to collapse her entire version of events. And because she feels cornered too, she becomes willing to escalate. Noah's search finally leads him to the most disturbing possibility of all. The man linked to Audra may not just be an alternative father candidate, but someone actively invested in keeping Noah trapped in the story. Whether out of fear, blackmail, revenge, or shared ambition, this hidden connection transforms Audra's accusation into something closer to conspiracy. Suddenly, Noah is not only facing a personal betrayal, he is facing the possibility of coordinated manipulation, designed to force him into public responsibility for a child that may not be his, while shielding another man whose own exposure would be catastrophic. This discovery changes Noah internally. The confusion that weakened him begins to crystallize into purpose. He is no longer begging for clarity. He is hunting for the structure behind the deception. That change in Noah is visible, and it terrifies Audra because she realizes the emotional chaos she relied on is beginning to solidify into resolve. So she chooses escalation over retreat. She hints that if Noah continues to dig, she will go public with every intimate detail she can weaponize, every blurred memory she can frame as fact, every emotional failure of his she can turn into moral guilt. She does not need to prove everything. She only needs to make enough noise to destroy the clean version of him. Noah sees then that this battle was never going to be settled by emotion alone. It is a war of pressure points, a contest between truth and narrative, and in Genoa City, narrative often draws blood long before truth catches up. By the time the storm reaches its peak, Noah stands on the edge of becoming someone he never wanted to be. The need to clear his name collides with the need to reclaim his dignity. The desire to expose Audra collides with the fear that exposing her may also expose parts of himself he would rather never face. The family name, the unborn child, the missing pieces of memory, the hidden man in the shadows, the threat of public disgrace, all of it closes in until every decision feels contaminated. And that is what makes the situation so explosive. No one is acting from pure motives anymore. Nick's protection carries judgment. Audra's vulnerability carries calculation. Noah's search for truth carries vengeance. The Newman family's concern carries self-interest. Every emotion is mixed with something darker. Every act of defense risks becoming an act of destruction. In the end, the crisis does not simply ask whether Noah is the father. It asks whether he can survive being stripped of certainty without becoming cruel. It asks whether Audra is a liar, a victim, or something far more dangerous than either label can contain. It asks whether the Newman family can protect one of their own without turning him into another casualty of their obsession with control. And as the pressure builds, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This is no longer a scandal waiting to be solved. It is a psychological war already underway, and every delay, every secret, every carefully chosen threat is pushing Noah and Audra closer to a final collision that will not leave either of them unchanged. In a world where love is often confused with possession, where responsibility can be twisted into submission, and where memory itself can be used like a blade, the coming reckoning promises not peace but fallout. Bitter, personal, irreversible fallout.